pretty shocking and selfish. It just is. I want to tell you or explain to you the worst I ever saw. Hello, I'm Marcus Hayes and welcome to another episode of Rant on Road, because everyone loves a rant and the last Rant on Road seemed to get a good response from you guys. So let me know in the comments of this video what you want to rant about. But in this video, I want to rant about people's parking habits. It's fair to say that I've seen plenty of shocking attempts at parking during my driving career. In fact, there's some pretty shocking and selfish parking that goes on right outside my house. Now that may be because our neighbours don't like us, but yeah, it just seems like so many people that have got driving licences, I assume, are just unable to park, or they're just really crap at parking. Now, I want to gloss past the fact that men are better at parking than women. It is a fact, but yeah, I don't want to focus too much on that because there's some shocking parking that I see regularly from men and women. And I think we can divide this into two sections, right? You've got your parallel parking on a roadside, and then you've got some really shocking examples of parking in a car park, you know, in a shopping centre, in a supermarket, or that sort of thing. Everyone should be reverse parking whenever they get an opportunity to. It's simply easier to manoeuvre your car into a small area going backwards. It just is. You know, when the turning wheels are essentially behind you, right? If you're going backwards, you know, your turning wheels are behind you, behind the direction that you're moving. And that's why forklifts, for example, in warehouses have their steering wheels at the back, because it means that they can get into smaller spaces by going forward, right? But on a car, your turning wheels are at the front, so it just makes sense to go backwards into parking spaces. It makes sense to reverse into small areas. But the fact of the matter is that quite a large percentage of people on the road, even though they have driving licenses, are clearly not skilled enough or not confident enough to be manoeuvring their car when it's going backwards. And this is a problem because, you know, reverse parking is, or definitely was in my day, part of the driving test. Also, nowadays, so many cars have got parking sensors, parking cameras, so there's just no excuse for you to not choose the easiest, in my opinion, method of parking, which is reverse parking. You know, you've got way more manoeuvrability getting into a small space when you're reversing. You just have, right? There's, you know, less risk of you hitting a curb or hitting another car that's parked near where you want to park if you're reversing, if you've got the confidence and the skill to be able to reverse park, which everyone should if you've got a driving license. Now, outside our house, you know, it's a normal residential street and, you know, there's no permits or anything like that. Anyone can park, you know, as long as there isn't a drop curb, anyone can park along our road. But, and again, I don't know if it's because some of the neighbours don't like us, but literally most days, you know, you'll struggle to get a parking space outside our house because people park in a manner where they're not getting as many cars in as possible, right? You'll have a space outside our house, you know, say between two other cars that can fit 3 cars in, you know, easily, right? And someone will come along and, you know, they'll leave such a gap between them and the other car that's parked that then you can only get one other car in the gap that they leave. You know, albeit with tons of space, you know, you're talking half a car length space in between each car. Whereas if they were just a bit more considerate and moved up a little bit closer to the other vehicle that was already parked there before they arrived, then you'd get 2 other cars in that space that they're leaving. You know, it's either down to ignorance You know, maybe they don't realise what they're doing. You know, a lot of people in the world seem to not realise what they're doing in all aspects of their life. You know, people just sort of carry on in a trance, really. So yeah, it's either ignorance or it's just downright rudeness. You know, people purposefully just not leaving neighbours enough space to park. And obviously, as time goes on, cars are getting bigger, there's more cars on the road, and yeah, there's just no excuse really for you to not, you know, make use of the space that you've got outside your house when you're parking your car, as a bit of courtesy to your neighbours. Now, again, we've had a little bit of beef with our neighbours in the past, nothing major at all. It's just that there's a few people that live near us that are utter morons and think that it's acceptable to keep people awake at 2 AM whilst they're outside singing karaoke, even though they're in their 60s and 70s. But I digress. But even though we don't get on with our neighbours, you know, we don't stoop to their level, we always park in a manner where we're maximising the space, right? Because that's what you should do. You know, you want to leave yourself and other people enough space to get out of the parking spaces, obviously, but you know, there's no need to leave half or 3/4 of a car length in between you and another car that's already parked. It's just a waste of space, and yeah, it's just not courteous to your neighbours. So that brings me on to what I consider like the second section of this video, where we're talking about car parks, parking lots, as you guys in America would call them. You know, whether you're at a shopping centre or a mall, as you guys in America would call them, or whether you're at a supermarket, you know, where you've got a car park with parking bays. Now, one of my pet hates, and my beautiful girlfriend Kat shares this pet hate, is when people drive forwards into a parking space in a car park. Again, as I said a moment ago, you should always be reverse parking into a spot. You know, as well as the fact that you've got more manoeuvrability, as I've already explained, when it comes to a car park, you know, you imagine you're pulling up to a parking space, and you know, because you're pulling up to a parking space, you're looking in your mirrors, you can see if there's any other cars behind you that are also coming into the car park to look for a space, so you know what's going on, right? You can see ahead of you if any people are driving out of their spaces. You know, as you're coming into the car park, you can see what's going on. You're naturally aware of what's going on, right? So you're able to line yourself up to reverse park into a bay without, you know, causing any unnecessary accidents or anything, because you're naturally like aware of what's going on, right? Whereas if you've just come back to your car, you know, you don't know what's going on, right? You can't see what cars are sort of driving on the roadway bit around the car park, right? Because you're sitting in your car. You might have other cars either side of you and possibly in front or behind you, depending on if there's, you know, multiple roads, right? So when you're coming in to park, that's a perfect opportunity for you to be going backwards, essentially, right? Because you've already judged what's going on around you. And as I say, you have more manoeuvrability when you're going backwards, right? So you're able to make those little subtle adjustments as you're moving into a parking space, you know, whether you need to drive in and out a couple of times or not, to get yourself nice and straight in the parking space, leave yourself and the other people enough room to get out of your cars. Happy days. The other benefit of reverse parking into a car parking space is that when you need to drive out of the space, because again, you're not fully aware of what's going on with other cars that are moving around the car park, because you know, you've just got into your car, you've put your belt on, you've, you know, started your engine. Even if you did sort of have a quick look to see what cars are coming along before you got in your car, there's often quite a bit of time by the time you put your shopping in the back, by the time you've got your belt on, etc., before you're actually then going to be pulling out of the space, right? So it just makes sense to be pulling out of the space going forwards, so you can literally creep out and then you can look to see if there are any other cars coming, rather than reversing out of your space to potentially end up having an accident with someone who's, you know, driving around the car park looking for a space, or someone who's just come out of their space, who might not be very aware of what's going on in the world. Again, a lot of people just aren't aware of what's going on in the world. So, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. You should reverse into a space and you should drive out of a space, you know, regardless of whether it's parallel parking on the street or whether you're driving out of a parking space in a car park. The other thing is, people that drive into a space in a car park, you know, a supermarket or a shopping centre, you'll see it so often where, you know, because there's less manoeuvrability, for you to drive into a space in one movement and sort of avoid the car that's sort of on your outside as you're turning in. So if you're turning into a space right, you know, to sort of avoid hitting the car on your left as you're pulling in with your front left wing, you end up having to be over to the right too far. So you see so many people that drive frontways into a space, but then are too lazy to sort of reverse back out and then drive back frontwards in, because driving frontways into a space is laziness. You know, you've either not got enough skill to be reverse parking, or you think you haven't, or you're just lazy, right, or stupid. So yeah, these people often leave their cars kind of diagonal in the space. So, you know, you're going to be causing someone who's parked on your right hand side, who might have reversed parked in, because that's what you're supposed to do if you're not an idiot, you know, it's going to cause them difficulty getting out of their driver's side, right? So I just think if you're driving frontways into a space in a shopping centre or a car park, it's only because you're either stupid or lazy or ignorant, or maybe a combination of all three. And yeah, often you end up not parked straight. You often end up causing other people problems getting out of their cars, and then, you know, you've got to reverse out of your space, which in my opinion is way more dangerous than driving out of your space. Now, I'm adult enough to acknowledge that there is actually an example of why you would drive frontways into a space in a car park or a shopping centre, and that's if you want to make it easier for you to put your shopping in the boot of your car, right? You know, again, I can definitely see that that is a benefit, but I'm not willing to accept that that's the reason that most people drive frontwards into a space. You know, most people are doing it because they're downright lazy, or they just haven't got the ability, even though realistically it's easier to reverse park into a space. And I think as time goes on, as cars are getting bigger and bigger and there's more of them on the road, and frankly car parking spaces aren't getting any bigger. So, you know, it's even more important as we move forward to park as central and as straight as you can in a car parking space, right? And as cars are getting bigger, it's even more essential that you reverse park into spaces so that you can drive out frontways, because, you know, you might have two really tall cars next to you in the car parking space, right? So it makes sense to be, you know, looking forward as you're driving out, forwards, right? But unfortunately, as our lives get easier and easier with technology, and we become a little bit dumber overall, to be honest, I think human intelligence has kind of peaked in a way in terms of the general population. So I think it's inevitable that people are just going to continue to be a little bit less intelligent with everything, including parking. And I think this problem of people not using their brains and parking the way they should be is not going to get any better. So I think it's something we're just going to have to live with. But like with most acts of idiocy, it's important that those of us that are still trying to live a life where we are using our brains and not just becoming another numpty in the world, I think it's important that we don't end up falling into the same traps as these other people. So I would urge you all to continue reverse parking wherever you can, because it is the correct way to do things. And also try to forgive people that aren't reverse parking. You know, we're having a rant now and we're mocking them, but you know, we've got to take these things with a pinch of salt. You know, you can't change how other people behave, and there's no point getting upset about it. You know, when I see a car parked front ways in a space, you know, some big Range Rover parked diagonal where they've clearly driven in front ways, and you know, they're clearly way too close to the car next to them, even if it is my car, you know, I tend not to get the ump about it. Touch wood, I haven't ever had any sort of car park dings on my car because of it, although this car actually has got a bit of damage on the front wing. Maybe that was caused by an idiot parking wrong, I don't know. You know, like a lot of things in life, it's important that we carry on doing the things we know we should. Yes, identifying and maybe mocking people that are not doing things the way they should, but the most important thing is that, you know, we continue to live the way we know we should, and not lose any sleep over these little minor things. But you know, I think it is an interesting subject nonetheless. Now, before I go, I want to tell you or explain to you the worst attempt at parking I ever saw. And it was parallel parking on a street. It was many years ago. And it was this lady trying to park a Fiesta into a spot, right? Reverse parking into a spot, I might add. Kudos for that. But they were reversing into the spot, so they were parking on the left-hand side. So they were, you know, they had, you know, they were reverse parking into the left-hand side of the street, and they were at the point where, you know, they'd got the rear end in, and then you obviously turn the steering wheel to the right to bring the nose in, right? And that's what they did. So they're reverse parking in, bringing the nose in, and they ended up hitting the car behind. So this lady, without moving the steering wheel, pulled, which was already facing to the right, pulled back out of the space, and then without moving the steering wheel again, reversed back into the space, and obviously hit the car behind again. Because if you don't adjust the steering, then you're obviously just going to end up in the same place that you was the first time. And again, she kept the steering wheel exactly where it was and drove out of the space, and then kept the steering wheel exactly where it was and reversed back into the space and hit the car again. And she'd done this about 4 or 5 times, and then you could see her sort of get the ump with herself as if she didn't know why she kept crashing into this car behind her, and then yeah, just gave up and drove off. So yeah, that's definitely the most idiotic example I've ever seen of trying to park, even though she was trying to do it the right way, which is to reverse park. So I want you all now to get in the comments and describe to me the worst example of parking that you have ever seen. If you've got any pictures of really bad parking that you want me to see, feel free to ping them over through Facebook or Instagram. The links to that will be in the description as usual. But other than that, let me know what you want to rant about and what you want me to rant about potentially in a future Rant on Road video. And it doesn't have to be something to do with driving, you know, anything. And yeah, we'll have a rant about it in the future. But for now, I'm going to end this video here. Massive thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Do click subscribe if you're new. Check the links in the description for my social media, my email address, my website, the Petrolhead style website, and that sort of thing. Massive thanks, as always, to my patrons for your ongoing support. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.